wonderful panel for a brief introduction of themselves. And I'm going to start off with Debbie Cool-Cicchini. Debbie, over to you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. I guess it depends on where you may be calling in from. I'm Debbie Cool-Cicchini, and I'm Executive VP of Intact. And absolutely, I chose insurance. That's the one thing that people probably don't know about myself. And I joined 17 years ago when we were another brand, and I am delighted to be here today.
Thanks so much, Debbie. Tina, how about you?
Certainly. Thanks, Bev. Thank you, everybody. It's an honor to be here today with you. I am a little bit of a different story from Debbie in terms of my father had a very successful insurance brokerage in the greater Vancouver area. And I did choose it, and I chose it because I saw how passionate he was for the industry and how much fun he had, and thought, why wouldn't I at least try this? And I was really lucky, went in from day one and just fell in love with the business, and worked in that brokerage. Eventually, we sold to Hub when it was formed in 1998, and have had the opportunity to serve as president of our Greater Vancouver operations in the last 5 years as president of Hub Canada.
Awesome. Thank you, Tina. And over to Lynn Oldfield.
Thanks very much, Bev, and welcome everyone. I'm delighted as well to join you this afternoon. My name is Lynn Oldfield. I'm the president and CEO of AIG's operations here in Canada. And that's a gig I've had for almost 14 years, an opportunity to lead the most talented team in the industry. And I've celebrated 31 years with AIG. So I'm a lifer. We count them in dog years at AIG. So I've been here hundreds of years. And yes, I am that old. I'm a lifelong learner, a first generation Canadian, first kid to go to university. And the only reason I'm in the insurance business is I was looking for a co-op job in my first co-op work term. And I was asked the most unusual interview question. No one could have prepared me for it. And I thought, maybe these guys aren't as boring as I thought they might be. So that's what got me started. And I'm actually going to put out a challenge to our audience, because we want you using that chat this afternoon. So I do a lot of mentoring and work with young professionals in our industry on personal branding. So just to set the mood, I would like everyone in the audience to type. So first of all, put yourself in your power position. And on your very best day as a professional, what's the adjective that people would use to describe you? Your very best day, when you killed it. And just start popping those words into the chat and we'll get going. Over to you, Bev.
Thanks, Lynn. What an introduction by all of you. And thanks for the enthusiasm from all of you. We're going to get going and build off of that momentum. And I'm going to ask you all, where does your motivation and passion as a successful executive leader come from? Could I ask, maybe I'll start off with Debbie again. Any thoughts, Debbie?
Oh, gosh. You know, it's an interesting question, because I think motivation as a leader comes from different places. It depends on who you are. I mean, my motivation is within as a leader. I think the most important thing for me is people. I am a people person. No one would know this. I'm a bit of a nurturing person, believe it or not, but those who have worked with me before or work with me now would know that. I love to work with people. And I actually applied to med school before joining our former brand. So there's a good, I think a bit of a comparison about wanting to help people. And that's what we do in insurance, is we help people. And if I had to do a second career, I would go into the medical field as well. So just a nice little tidbit about Debbie CC. But I think one of the, my motivation comes within. To me, success in my world is promoting people, seeing people develop and do well, and coaching and being a mentor to the hundreds of young people in our industry who want to move ahead and have seen this as a hidden gem, have seen this industry that doesn't have, although I do believe it is increasing, that doesn't have that, cachet that perhaps the banks do. If you're graduating out of a top university in Canada, a lot of the new graduates are still going for the banks or other brands. But I think the insurance industry, the insurers are, our brands are increasing. Our large consolidation of brokerages across the country as well, I think, are really bringing in those new grads, and they're seeing. And then the more people we get into the insurance, the more they're telling friends. And they're saying, this is a really great gig. You can go far. It's challenging. It's not boring. I mean, when I came into insurance, and as I mentioned, I chose it, I didn't know a single person. And I don't know if that's unfortunately or fortunately, Tina was talking about her dad. I knew no one. I didn't even have a neighbor's son's child, nobody in my life who had been in the insurance industry. And so now I feel like a poster person, because I can say, it is a hidden gem and there's a lot to do. But for motivation, it's really me as a leader is moving people, making sure that the team that I'm responsible for, and those not even responsible, but those around me in my organization, I can help. As I mentioned, through mentoring, through coaching, getting the training that they need to move on in their careers so that they're our future leaders.
That's awesome. Well, you're in the right business, Debbie, as you said, being insurance and helping people, it's probably speaking to your soul. Tina, what about yourself? What's your motivation?
I was listening to Debbie and thinking, I'm not sure if it's totally different. I mean, I think inherently, innately within me, I've always been interested in learning more, challenging myself, continuing to grow as an individual. I think that's just something within my DNA. But when I first started out in the career, I would say I've also always really loved to compete. And so from an early age, when I was a young child and a teenager, I was active in a bunch of team sports, and also, went after student council and captains of Blue House and all these things that we had at our school. And somewhere I think I've always just had that drive for competition, but drive for competition within the spirit of a team. I really always, from a very early age, and I think because of all those team sports I did, recognize that there was more power in a group than an individual. Somehow it's within. I will say, I am somebody who wants to do things well, but I've never been somebody who wants to do things perfectly. So I rarely ever strive for perfection, and it's more like getting 95 or 90% of it right, but it's more about me constantly being able to push myself forward. As I've gotten older now, I would definitely say that my passion and motivation as a leader is shifting. And while I've always enjoyed being part of the teams, I really, really want the people that work with me at Hub to be successful, to grow, to have development opportunities, to win at what they're doing, and really help sort of harness them to be the best version of themselves.
That's great. Thanks for that, Tina. And Lynn, what do you have to add to that?
So these ladies have hit on so many elements that actually sound like you're describing Lynn Oldfield. It's ironic how we all ended up together on this panel. I would say, I'm a very resilient, tenacious individual. I have been knocked down many, many times. And I used to have the handle of the Energizer Bunny when I first joined AIG, because I tried to be everywhere, and we built the business, we grew the business. I devoted myself to understanding Alberta and the oil patch and energy, and sat down with brokers and clients to learn, to understand. I'm not an engineer. I didn't have the background. And so I find the intellectual stimulation to be like candy. And I love the variety. There is still something new every single day. But what gets me out of bed in the morning is the team that I have the opportunity to work with, and our clients and brokers across the country. We spend a lot of time with our clients talking about their business challenges and issues, and we're talking about the biggest issues of the day, ESG and climate and the geopolitical conflict. These are real risks. And I can't think that if I were a banker, because like Debbie, those options all existed, that I would actually have such a front row seat at some of the most interesting issues of the day. So I think the industry is absolutely fascinating. I would never, ever have considered leaving. And I really get a lot of joy from people.
That's awesome. It is actually ironic that the three of you ended up together, but I'm sensing all the similarities, and I'm really looking forward to some of these other questions I have in store for you. So I don't think that this discussion would be complete if I didn't ask you just about where good leadership comes from. What does it look like, and how can it be demonstrated at any phase of someone's career? Like on the line today, we'll have early career folks, some individual contributors, maybe those women trying to make it into management. What does good leadership look like at any phase? Lynn?
I think I give the best, the same advice to young professionals, and my advice is always, you know, there's kind of two sets of skills, technical skills and soft skills, but build your technical skill set. And this industry requires very strong technical skills. So if you're an underwriter or a claims professional or a broker, learn your craft. And I always say, kill your day job, like just kill your day job. They set a goal, jump over it. They set another goal, jump over that. So do the learning, do the work, and make sure if you're going to make a career move, you're going for the right reasons. This is the great reshuffling, ladies and gentlemen. Lots of people are moving around, but make sure you're very deliberate about planning your career. And I would just direct everybody to the chat. So I believe those words that you put in the chat are inspiring words of great leaders to me. When I look to my role models, so many of the words that you've chosen are the best leaders, and we're watching it unfold live in the Ukraine right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Tina, did you have anything to add to that?
Sure. Maybe just one thing I would piggyback on is I would just say, like, good leadership today, I think, might even look a little bit different than it did 30 years ago when I started out. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is just the acceleration of change that's happening. I mean, I'm speaking for Debbie and Lynn, but I'm sure they would concur. The three of us and our leadership teams have dealt with things we probably never thought we would be dealing with in business over the last 3-4 years. And so I think good leadership also is being able to just kind of put your hand up and say very authentically and transparently to your team, I don't have all the answers. I don't necessarily know where this is going to go. So, you know, part of it is just being able to be humble, but yet articulate that clear vision and be able to get people to want to follow you. You know, I think a good leader gets the respect of their team by being able to assemble the teams that really are diverse and each bring different strengths to the table and really help solve for things in a way that is a lot more powerful than what any one person can do. So, you know, good leadership to me is also being able to just harness that best performance out of everyone.
That's great. And Debbie, how would you add to this conversation? Because I did want to get the opinions of all of you for this question. Debbie?
Thanks, Bev. You know, it's interesting. I think that I could have defined, I mean, I still can, a good leadership, great leadership up to 25 months ago as something different than what's happened 25 months ago. None of us could reach back and say, okay, so how did I handle the last global pandemic? You know, what do I do? So to me, good leadership today, and when I look at the unrest worldwide and I take a look at the dynamics of what's happening, it's compassion. It's really understanding your team and being there for them, especially the last 25 months. It's to understand that everyone's family life was touched differently than 25 months ago. And that is key, that compassion and that understanding. And it's to really understand how can we work with people going forward, because coming out of COVID, our companies and everyone's lives is shaped differently than it was before. And, just the hybrid world, for example, at many of the companies, how will we manage our companies in this new ecosystem when staff are working more from home? So for me, that great leadership is being agile, it's being nimble, and really understanding and listening to your people. Us three women up here are all boomers. I'm always trying to get in the head of the greatest, the kind of the share of our workforce who aren't boomers, to think like they are and have them tell me, what do you think? How can you add to the conversation, and what would you do? And seek their input. And I think great leadership, we need to do more of that.
That's great. Thank you, Debbie. I think that's a great point. And to Tina's point earlier, it's important to have these teams and diverse teams and have that teamwork, because it does bring a unique perspective to the conversation. So I appreciate that comment, Debbie. I'll stick with you, Debbie, on this next question. From your intro, you've had some varied roles along the way. Was there ever a time that you had to take a lateral position, and that was in order to maybe continue your journey? How did that work out for you?
Oh, absolutely. I think many times in my career, I've had to take a lateral position before you move up, but because you get a lot more breadth and experience and knowledge under your belt, so to speak. But the one that's probably most prevalent and more recent was when I joined my former brand. When I joined Intact, I was an executive vice president running multiple states in the United States. For those on the call, I didn't say in my intro, I'm actually not, I chose insurance, but I'm not a lifetime insurance person. In that my former role was an executive at a Canadian bank, both in North America. So I was in the US for 6 years prior to coming to Canada and joining the insurance industry. So, I was an executive vice president in charge of wealth management, commercial, retail banking, and marketing in the United States with a bank. And as I said, I had multiple states, and I was joining Canada. We needed to come back. We had a terminally ill parent. We needed to get back to Canada. And so I took, one would look, and I had people say to me, well, why would you take a step down to a senior vice president? But I did. I took a senior vice president of the Ontario division with Intact, but it was a learning experience for me. First of all, it was a risk. I had a couple of opportunities, and when I got approached for this role, when they said it was ING Canada, I was like, oh, this is great, because I had launched another Canadian e-commerce bank, and I said, this is great. They said, no, this is insurance, and I'm like, oh, insurance. So oh, I thought you were calling me, about the banking arm. And they were like, no. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. And so I'm a risk taker, and I joined the insurance industry. It's still part of the financial services arena, but it was all about challenge and reward. It was about experience, and it was getting into a different part of financial services and learning. I knew it was a totally different product, and that was fine, but it was actually helping people, what hits at my core. And it was still in the financial services area, which is where I, wanted to be. And the rest is kind of history. Really enjoyed it. As I said, I was a bit, not skeptical, but I was a bit thinking, I don't know what this is all about. But then, as I said, I could be the poster person saying, this is a hidden gem and the opportunities are vast. And what I've learned when you get in here with artificial intelligence, with the actuarial work, with data scientists, I could go on and on. This is not a simple business, and it's not what people from the outside looking in think it is. And that's why we need to get more and more young people thinking insurance for a career.
Absolutely. Lynn, do you have any stories to share about lateral moves?
I always have crazy stories about my career. I went on vacation once. My husband was with Xerox and he'd won us a trip to, I don't know, Thailand or something. It was wonderful. I was gone for 2 weeks. I came back to a huge inbox and I had left my boss with 3 candidates for a job that I was hiring to work for me. And, I got through the inbox, this is a long time ago. And at the bottom of my inbox was a plane ticket for me to New York the next day and an agenda. And I finally went down to see him at about 2 o'clock. And I said, well, I'm going to ask you about New York in a second, but who did you choose? And he said, Lynn, fabulous candidates, but I chose you. And I said, I beg your pardon? And he said, no, you would be the absolute best. You're already doing this job off the side of your desk. You're building this business. So I picked you. You're going to run it. You're going down to interview for the job with head office. And I said, no, you don't understand. This person was going to work for me. Oh, no. While you were gone, I gave your job away. And I'm like, pardon? You mean the job I loved more than life itself? So Lynn Oldfield's reaction to everything is, keep your mouth shut, keep your wits about you, keep your decorum in place, and then literally go down the hall, close the door, and scream at the top of your lungs. I went home that night. The best decision you can ever make in your career is choosing the right partner. Oh, I was blessed with that one. And I was angry. And he finally was listening to me for a few days and said, so you're either going to do this and shut up, or you're going to quit. So you're deciding right now. And I'm like, well, I love this company. I'm building this company. And he was very clearly instructing me, get over it, woman, and suck it up. And let's, again, kill the new job. And, I believe God closes a door and opens a window. It's been my personal career experience. I then found out I was expecting this job was a little less demanding than the role I had been doing. And all of a sudden, I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time in the States, but also not have a completely insane job when I took my maternity leave. So the blessing was the backwards move, and it happened to me way more than once.
That's a great story. And sometimes these things, I guess, might be necessary to propel us to the next level, and we don't even see it coming. So that is a great story. Lynn, I'm going to keep on you because it kind of leads to another question that I had. And maybe that was the example that you might have shared with us, but I was going to talk about the fact that we know that the financial sector is male dominated. So I wanted to talk about being heard and navigating this industry. When did you actually know you had found your voice?
So it's an interesting story tied to a very important mentor in my career, and her name is Yetta James. She was the first managing director at Marsh here in Canada. An incredibly successful executive, the only woman in the room for something like 30 years in the heavy industrial commercial insurance. And when I took on a significant leadership role in distribution at AIG, I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder. People kept calling me, wow, what a great female, leading that particular and it was always, a woman being attached to being a great leader, or what a great female. And I finally said, why can't they just drop the adjective and say she's a great leader? Why am I now a great example of women in leadership? I just want to be a great insurance professional or a great insurance leader. And it was Yetta who simply said to me, you now have a platform and you are in the room and you're representing all of us in that room. And don't you dare waste this opportunity. And you are required as a female leader, regardless of how you got there, to pull every woman up that ladder with you. So, she did the visual. She challenged me. I thought a lot about it. So that's got to be early 2000s because Yetta's been long retired. And I have really tried to mentor, in particular, our women leaders, but all of our young professionals that are leading teams pull everybody along with you. It's not a competition. Debbie and Tina and I are not trying to kill each other for the same job. In fact, quite the opposite. We want to rise the entire ocean and float everyone's boat at the same time. So it was powerful advice. I had to get rid of my attitude, but once I did, it has been my most fun assignment, I think.
That's great. That's really inspiring. I wanted to ask Tina, did you have any thoughts on the opportunity or the time that you had found your voice?
You know, Bev, it's interesting because there's sort of two parts to this. First of all, I think I was really lucky because when I was growing up, my parents had always instilled in both my sister and I really kind of this notion that we could be anything we wanted, do anything we wanted. And whilst I'm quite confident I could never become a professional singer or a surgeon just by my talents or lack thereof, I do believe they also really encouraged us to be authentic and be true, in my case, to who I was, and to observe others and see how others did things, how they sold, they led, but to look for those good characteristics and learn from them, but always present or speak in a way that was genuine and true to who I was. So I don't know, it could be partly, and it probably ties into another question you're going to take us into later, but when my father started this brokerage that he had in Western Canada, I call him the pioneer of diversity in the insurance brokerage industry. And I don't unequivocally know this to be true, but I'm 99% confident he hired the first female producers, the first female chief operating officer. He had the first people of color on his leadership team. So I had kind of this benefit of maybe starting off my career in this environment where diversity was really celebrated. So I didn't feel very often that I had to work hard to find my voice. Now, that being said, when I started off in the industry, I was in sales, and I, to this day, will tell you that my favorite thing to do is like an intimate dinner party with 8 or 10 people around the table and just really deep, rich conversations. And when I first started off in the business, the most intimidating thing for me was to walk into large events with 200, 300, 400 people, work the room. I'm trying to garner sales. And so I literally at that time would have described myself still to this day as a sociable introvert. And in the early days, I can remember going to events that I had to participate in and hiding in the bathroom. Like I was hiding in the bathroom, trying to avoid the pre-cocktail hour where I'd be forced to mingle and connect with people until I could sit down at the table. And so in that regard, I had trouble finding my confidence and finding my voice and really learning how to be comfortable being with people and recognizing that I could bring something to the table that might be interesting and that somebody might value having a conversation with me. And I think in that aspect, it really became about practice. And, to this day, in anything I do, I think the more you practice, the more you prepare, the more you throw yourself into those uncomfortable situations, they just get easier with time and help you find that voice.
Wow, that's amazing. Between this whole conversation, my mind is just racing and I have so many different areas to jump to. You talked about diversity, Lynn mentioned mentorship. We're going to get there. But I'm going to flip things around and ask Debbie another question. Debbie, you have such a busy job, I'm sure, but as a woman in leadership, what would you say some of the obstacles that you faced and how did you handle them?
I have fortunately in my career, had a lot of interesting obstacles as a female in banking prior to joining the insurance industry, very male dominated at the top. And in all honesty, still is. It was interesting when I joined Intact 17 years ago, I was in the only female in the room with a great number of French Canadian gentlemen. And, you know, very, very interesting to come in with no insurance expertise either. So I came in for a lot of other qualities, was hired for a lot of other things. So, you know, one of the interesting, and I didn't consider it a barrier, I considered it a challenge, or, you know, not an obstacle, was understanding the actuarial world. I didn't deal with that when I was in the banking realm, and it was to really understand it. You know, when you overcome a barrier, and it was early in my career at Intact when our CEO said to me, you know, Debbie, Friday afternoon, and, you know, Lynn touched on it earlier. It's really great. You need to hone your technical skills, which is really important to get credibility. You need to understand as a leader, because it's important for your people see that you understand. But our CEO said at the time, he says, you know, Debbie, and it was a very, very detailed conversation. You've just got your honorary actuarial degree. And I'm like, great. Okay. You know, that is fabulous. That's what I am looking for. But I mean, as a woman, you know, I think it's still there at times that you think there's a decision that's been made, and you hear a comment where, you know, the guys go off to the men's room and have a conversation, and things change, or maybe after a meeting, you know, they go out for a couple of beers, and the narrative changes. And if there's, you know, any advice, you know, when I talk to women about, you know, what obstacles or barriers that you might have faced, you know, what I've tried to do in my career is not look at them as an obstacle or a barrier, but to look at them as an opportunity. And so how do I overcome that? Is to stay connected. Oh, I heard you guys went for a beer last night, and I heard this. And it's not to shrink away from it. It's to say, you know, what was discussed after the meeting? Tell me, you know, how I can help, or has anything changed, just to reaffirm that nothing's changed from the time that you had in the meeting. Like one of the big things I have found as a challenge as a woman in the roles that I previously had was the whole work-life balance, and we haven't really touched on that today.
I'm just going to remind everyone to put yourself on mute, please. So we don't miss any of this great conversation. Go on, Debbie.
Great, thanks, Bev. I didn't know if that was me echoing for a moment. Yeah, so I would say one of the, you know, obstacles for me was just the work and life balance. I've got and, you know, and it's just making sure that your voice is heard on the personal front as well. Whether we like it or not, things are very different. And I think it's getting, and it's evolved over the years. And that is, you know, vocal about schedules, vocals about what we need to do. And when I was working in the US for, 6 years, I had the opportunity to live there. I would say to, you know, my fellow male colleagues, if we were having a board meeting at night, we need to break at 7. Let's take our break at 7. And why? Well, it was dependent on the age of my child there. At the time I had one. I said, because I have to say goodnight to him. Because I have to step out of the meeting. It's important to me. It's important to him. And so in the obstacles, part of the obstacles is don't let them form if you can. Stay on top of it. Make sure that your voice is heard and you do what you need to do as a woman. But I would say, honestly, Bev, part of the biggest obstacle for me wasn't the work. There's always situational elements. It was really, for me, is getting that great balance between work and life, and owning it. Don't feel guilty, and make sure that your voice is heard.
Awesome. I'm going to continue on that thought, work-life balance. But first, I want to get our audience. If you are inspired by this conversation, I want you to type voice into the chat, please. Type voice if you're inspired by these 3 women that are talking with us today. Let's talk about that work-life balance thing. Some people might say it's a work-life management. You know, we're women, we're balancing a number of things in our lives, you know, besides work, to varying degrees, depending on who you're talking to. How do all of you stay grounded? And what else fills your days? Anyone?
Well, I can jump in on that, Bev, a little bit. You know, it's interesting. I don't think when I'm a mother of 2 children who are now 21 and 18, but when they were younger, in 2005. It was just a year after having my second daughter. And one day, June 22nd, 2005, I woke up with a headache, an excruciating, debilitating headache that ended up lasting for 3 years, 3 days, 24/7, nonstop. And it was just a migraine. I was worried it was a lot worse at the time. And so I was working with this debilitating pain. And that, unfortunately, as some might know, once you have a health challenge, whatever it might be, it's often when you have your greatest learning moments. And the big learning moment for me in that event was that I was not prioritizing me first and my health and well-being. And if I was not healthy and taking care of myself, then as a result of that, I couldn't be there for my husband, my children, my work, etc. So that was a massive eye-opener, one I wish I hadn't had to learn. But what it did do as a result of it is it forced me to be absolutely disciplined about trying to create that balance that prioritizes me at the center of it, and then all of the important things around me. So I go into annual planning sessions with myself where I literally chart out on sort of, I don't know if some of you have seen it, it's called the Wheel of Life. You know, what are the things that are important to me? What do I want to do in the course of the year? Where do I think I'm performing right now with respect to my exercise, with respect to maybe my charitable giving, with respect to time with my husband, with respect to business goals, etc. What do I want to set out to achieve? And I mean, it may sound really structured and formal, but I feel that when I do that planning with intention and set out those goals, and then go back and measure it every month, and most importantly, build all of that into my calendar. So the date nights with my husband, the trips away, the one-on-one time with the kids, my almost daily exercise, at least 5 days a week, all of that stuff, it just helps me to achieve that work-life balance. By the way, I don't like the expression work-life balance. I never have, because I feel at certain times one thing is performing at a different level than another. But by putting it in the calendar, it becomes sacrilegious for me to break I'm maybe not using the right word, but if it's there, it stays there. Nothing gets bumped for that event. So that's how I've kind of dealt with that.
That's great. Some good tips to live by. Lynn, you are so busy as well. What do you have to say about your days being filled and how you also remain grounded?
So I think the advice and tips from Tina and Debbie are all part of my arsenal, because it does take a village. And so I always believed in hiring the best childcare we could afford. Our daughter is now 21, has chosen to major in risk and insurance in her university studies because she saw a really great lifestyle. She saw how excited I would get about client meetings and topics and challenges and fixing problems. And I think that was very attractive. So, but also, you know, to Tina's point, not always being the one. And I'm sure there are some people dialed into this session who have experienced mom guilt. And I simply let it go a very, very long time ago. And so much of my personal growth has come from literal crisis, either in business or health or family. And the global financial crisis had huge impact on AIG. I was not leading the company at the time. But my husband said to me that fateful morning in September of 2008, "What are you going to do, honey?" And I said, "Well, it's fight or flight. If you'll let me, I want to stay and I want to fight. We're going to save this company." And we decided together that he would actually become the primary parent in our home. And that's pretty tough for a mom to give that up, right? Not to be the first phone call. I'm still not the primary parent in our home. However, I am the one to go through for advice of the heart, drama with the girlfriends, really challenging human interaction and behavior. So we don't call dad about that stuff. But it was just giving myself permission to not feel guilt over never making a pizza lunch or not being the girl on the field trip. And the relationship that those two share is fantastic, but so is the relationship I have with my daughter. So scheduling, Tina, what you described, I call intentional and deliberate. And the more intentional we can be about where we spend our time and who gets our energy, and who's calling is, I think, a big part of it. So prioritize your health, your wellness, your mental health, and also, get help when you need it, right? That's why we have employee assistance programs. It's for those times that every single one of us gets to or has in this global pandemic, where it's just too much. And we just need a completely autonomous voice to kind of vent and get some advice from. So it takes a village.
Wow. I appreciate it. And I think some of the comments in the chat, appreciate the honesty that the three of you have shared, and the vulnerabilities, and, allowing yourself to be human, even though, you have jobs and big jobs at that. But, at the end of the day, we all have to take care of ourselves. And certainly that is part of the balancing act that we all have to do. Just a couple of more fun questions before we get back into some career advice. Debbie, I understand that you're an avid reader. Can you share with us, what your preference or what you're reading these days? And I encourage anyone in the chat who has some great books or great reads right now to share with all of us. Debbie?
Great question. I was talking to Brad from the Institute about it earlier. One of the ones I'm reading right now, and it actually ties really great into the conversation that we were just having, particularly any leader, not even only senior leaders, is called Atlas of the Heart. And in that book, there's a great quote about vulnerability is not a weakness, is actually the greatest measure of courage. And I think women need to, particularly women leaders, need to show that vulnerability to their people. They need to be open and candid about some of their challenges. I had a young lady, it was several years ago, and just they look at women leaders, especially 10, 15 years ago, when there perhaps were not as many in the senior ranks. And I remember this one lady said to me, and it's the simplest of things, but I'll always remember it. She says, until I saw you in a sleeveless summer dress, I didn't know whether we were allowed to wear them.
Wow. Wow.
Isn't that something? And I'm like, oh gosh, I've got lots of these with a blazer. I hope they're okay because I'm wearing them. And I think I was new to the company back then, about 15 plus years ago. Perhaps, again, I'm dating myself, but we wouldn't see that today, but just very interesting. So Atlas of the Heart, it really puts, again, what we were talking in the conversation is, I am not going to be a great leader unless I'm good to myself. And so I highly recommend that as a read. The other one, a little bit more provocative, certainly, it's No Rules Rule. It's the Netflix book. It's bold. I'm not saying that we as insurance companies would do everything in there, but I think it's really great food for thought to get us thinking differently as we navigate and shape our companies coming out of this very unique time that we're in. So those are Atlas of the Heart and No Rules Ruled. They're on some website near you.
They're on the Debbie list. So
yes, I'm going to get the Oprah list and the
Debbie list.
The Reese list. Yeah, yes.
Thanks for sharing that, Debbie. I was just curious about something that's a little bit unique. As executive women, I'm sure that you've met many people, different walks of life, but is there any one person that you might say to yourself, I'd actually be interested in meeting them? Lynn, any thoughts on that?
You know that game you play, two truths and a lie when you're introducing someone? So this is always my two truths and a lie. So two of these statements are true, one is a lie. I have had brunch with Prince Harry, I have had lunch with Warren Buffett, and I have had dinner with Michelle Obama. So you guys can decide in the chat which one of those is the lie. But the one that is the lie, I would love to have dinner with Michelle Obama. So I followed her career from the moment her husband set foot on the global political stage. I watched her raise two girls in the biggest fishbowl in the world, and her podcasts are fantastic. Her relationship with her family, bringing her mom to the White House, figuring it out. It wasn't everybody's answer, but it was her family's answer. And setting aside her career completely when she didn't really love the idea of her husband becoming president of the United States. That's strength, that's confidence. And I just think I could learn a lifetime of nuggets from Michelle Obama.
Michelle, I know, she'd be my pick as well, one of them anyway. So that's great. Tina, did you have any thoughts on that?
You know, I don't know if I have one person. I've got to be totally honest with you. I mean, I'd love to have dinner with Michelle Obama too, and I think that would be fantastic. I will tell you, a couple of years ago, I got to go to this event down in Las Vegas, and it was a corporate event that was run by a bunch of US military folk, men and women. It was sort of this team building exercise. And then after we came back and had a debrief and all this sort of stuff, once the game had been finished, and the one lady that was running it was just fascinating. So these were all full-time military or sort of special ops or different people that this was just a side gig to make some additional funds for them. And this woman just inspired me so much. She, in her real life, goes into Asia and tries to crack human trafficking rings. And so I could have talked to her for hours. The point being is that there's so many interesting things out there that are happening that I have no exposure to. I think my ideal meal or dinner is with somebody that is so different than what I do on a day-to-day basis, and really with people that just inspire me with their humanity and the goodness that they're making happen. But I don't know who that would be. Anybody that fits that bill.
That's great. That's great perspective. Listen, I wanted to talk a little bit about career advice and get some of your input on that. But I was thinking about my good friend Beyonce, the singer, and she has a song called Girls, We Run the World. Take it as you will, but not to ignore, our male colleagues that are on the line with us today. Although we're building the sisterhood today, some of you may have had key male figures, whether good or bad experiences. I know we've heard a couple, but what can you share about, what the role our male colleagues have to play in terms of our growth, our empowerment, our development, etc.? I'm going to throw that out to any of you. Who wants to take that?
I can kick us off, Bev. AIG has placed its sponsorship and a lot of its energy in allyship. And you'll see as the British Open, the Women's Golf Open arrives this summer, for the very first time in professional sports, AIG took the purse of winnings that have always been half for women or a third for women. So we actually brought the pool of winnings for the women and the LPGA up to the equivalent of the PGA. So simple things like that, like right inequities Be deliberate in allyship, and never assume just because you have good intentions that things are going to change, because I have been in so many meetings on so many industry associations and boards where it comes time to promote someone or make a decision as a CEO retires, and the male voice, well, let's go with so and so, and I'm like, no way, where's the skills matrix? Let's get some diversity. And so I think they have to be open-minded, they have to be deliberate and intentional, and I think that's setting goals and objectives. 20 years ago, when they started talking about quotas for women on boards of directors, I was not a fan. I did not support, because then they're just putting a woman in place because they have to, because the math has to work. Instead, I wanted to change the whole conversation so that women earned the equal right to that seat at the table. But guess what? Here we are, 15 years later, and we have not moved the needle one iota with women on boards in all the survey data. So perhaps we better start measuring things, and perhaps we better put true goals and objectives. So at AIG, I have very, very intentional and deliberate goals and objectives around expanding diversity and inclusion. And I think all of us do.
That's great. I'm going to get to that in a moment. Any other thoughts? But I also am going to tie in the fact of mentorship. And mentorship can come in many different forms, but sometimes you may have had male or female mentors along the way. And how do you think those mentorship relationships influenced your leadership style? Debbie, maybe I can pass that one to you.
I think, like many of us on the panel today, we've probably had a lot of mentors. Interestingly, and maybe not so, because I wasn't a male dominated, two different industries, both banking and insurance. Many of my mentors have been male. Not as many. I've had one very important female mentor who was external. And I've been fortunate and lucky. They have been absolutely invaluable. And the advice that I would give to all the women on the phone today, and even men, is really push yourself on your mentors. Don't get people who think like you or you're most comfortable with. Really broaden it. I have found that, and then try to get into kind of your mentor's mind. And so there's mentors that are assigned to you. I've had the opportunity and the privilege of having, through work, mentors assigned to me from external, outside the business, and both executives inside as I have grown and moved up the ladder. But the diversity is the huge benefit for me. It's to have a diverse group of mentors who think differently, that you can choose who you can go to if you want to bounce something off of. Try and really understand and get inside their head. Is, why do you think like that? Or if you have an area that you're not particularly clear on because it's not your primary strength, to have someone you can go to say, I don't really get this. And again, vulnerability is courage. It's how you want to look at it. And for me, mentors are also about sometimes, or even looking at mentors is what not to do. I've had mentors in life, you always look at mentorship as they're going to continue to help you grow, but some great mentors as well will tell you the pits along the way and where you might fall, and kind of pave the way for you. They're not going to hold your hand, but they'll say, you should look out for that. You should look out for this. This happened to me. This could happen to you. And I think there's so much that mentors can do, but varied, diversified, and they're a huge part of my career. And I would suggest it'd be a huge part of everyone's career.
Beth, can I piggyback something on Debbie's comments there?
Sure.
It's interesting on the mentorship thing. In 2006, I had the opportunity to join a global organization called YPO. It's a president's organization. It's all about better educations through idea exchange and education. And it really touches on professional, personal, and family life. So all aspects that kind of make the human being. But what was really interesting to me when I joined this organization in 2006, full disclosure, huge percentage of the membership was male in the greater Vancouver area, CEOs of different companies. I was kind of going in dragging my heels a little bit, kicking and screaming, doing it more so because of the desire at that time. It's the wrong reason to join YPO. They'd kill me if I said this, but to sort of build our brand as a business in Vancouver. But they have this thing called forum, and effectively you get put into a group with 8 to 10 individuals that you don't know, and they become like your mini board of directors, and it's a safe place and absolute strict rules of confidentiality, and you meet with them once a month. And I've been with this group of 10 since 2006. And I think I had a real learning point there, and it hits on Debbie's comments about diversity, because when I joined that group and was put together with these 10, there were 2 I immediately connected with. They sort of thought like me. I knew they'd hang out well with my husband and I, do all this stuff. And over this journey, all these years, I have probably, meant in the nicest way, learned the least from those 2, but the other 7 who did not think like me, who did not look like me, who had completely diverse businesses, have taught me so much, because how they come at problems is completely different than how my brain will deal with a problem. So I really think that comment Debbie made about diversity of mentors, don't go looking for mentors that look like you and sound like you. Go look for mentors that don't have the same skill sets as you, because you'll get so much more out of that partnership or relationship.
That's great. And, you know, Tina, all of this conversation is really interconnected. And I am going to jump to diversity as just our one final thought before we see if there's any questions from our audience today. And Lynn, maybe I'll direct this to you, because you talked about diversity earlier. There's organizations that I know you support and encourage diversity. Can you talk and give the audience some perspective on, not from a corporate perspective, but from you personally? How has diversity shown up for you in your career?
It has varied. I would say diversity and the attention, the appropriate attention to true diversity, is escalating, and it's an imperative. But I would say my learning curve on diversity was a very, very slow burn. And then in the last 3 years, I would say it's gone through the roof, because I thought, as a first-generation Canadian, not from a lot of wealth or privilege or background or education, that I understood the Canadian experience and the movement of Black Lives Matter, the conversations, the richness of the dialogue, and simply asking some team members to share with our leadership team their stories of becoming Black insurance professionals, Indigenous insurance professionals, LGBTQ insurance professionals, has been a journey of evolution. So I'll make a couple of recommendations to the folks on the line. Ann Hildreth over at BI&I is the volunteer DE&I officer for ORIMS, the Ontario Risk and Insurance Management Society, and brilliantly, one of her objectives for 2022 was to run a diversity book club. So every couple of months, Anne picks the topic. So we started with Indigenous Canadians, a fabulous read, a lot of learning, and rocks, no kidding. We covered Black History Month, we covered disability, we were working on women in Women's History Month. And so it has been the richness of the dialogue. It's mostly women, but we certainly invite the gents to join us. And we can't all make all the meetings, you know how book clubs are, but we're helping each other learn, and we're bringing Canadian authors. And so if you follow CBC Reads, many of those authors are books that we have tackled so far this year. And I think that the diversity conversation has to be intentional. And, you know, we did not track anything but gender in our HR systems in Canada for my entire tenure of my career. The US has always tracked diversity statistics, but just simply getting that turned on for Canada was a very simple act so that we can benchmark our population and then get at fixing and doing and promoting and, you know, joining the Canadian Black Insurance Professionals Association as a sponsor. So putting our money where our mouth is, but leading the change and being very, very intentional about it.
That's great. And thanks for sharing ORIMS with us. And Hildreth does rock. She's another amazing woman that's out there. Listen, we could talk forever, but I did want to just make sure I cover off a couple of questions that I did see come through the chat. One question was, what class or seminar has been most impactful to you? Does anything come to mind for any of you?
I attended a program run by a lady named Victoria Medvac, who comes from Kellogg, is a professor at Kellogg University, and it's all on the art of negotiation. And Victoria is a tough negotiator. So her methods are too extreme for me, but she really helped me hone and improve my negotiation skills. So that's definitely one that comes to mind.
Great.
I actually had the opportunity, Bev, to attend an executive program at Stanford University a couple of years ago on actually design thinking for a couple of weeks. And it was interesting. We came back and we started putting together a lot of customer journeys as well within our organization, because at the end of the day, we're all in insurance and the premium is paid by the end customer. That's who's actually paying. And so did we have the journeys? Did we really understand? And I'll just name you one. It was actually interesting. We put a journey together and it was in the claims area when someone got into an automobile accident. And we were looking at the journey. Starting is when the customer picked up the phone and called us to say, I've had an accident. And this is just one very small thing, but really what we found is the journey starts when the accident happened.
Right.
That's when the accident happens. And we were able to map what we thought was a customer journey. Then I really wanted to understand design thinking 4 and 5 years ago, and it was very, very prevalent and still is. But then we brought in customers to go through the journey, and that was the aha. And that was just one example. I won't go through them. We actually sat to think about the customer journey, and we could see where what we would plot internally as a company and then what the customer told us could be very, very different. So that was a really great program that I went to on design thinking, which stretched my mindset and helped me think a little bit differently.
That's awesome.
And I'll just maybe add that one right here at the Insurance Institute of Canada that probably changed my life. So I have to go back a lot of decades, but as a brand new graduate, I didn't know anybody in the industry. I didn't know the industry. I didn't understand it. And I had been a teaching assistant all the way through university. So I simply took the course we used to call Train the Trainer, but it's the course you take if you'd like to be a CIP instructor. And then I became a CIP instructor for a decade, and I taught 1,000 students principle and practice of insurance. And I learned very early, a really important learning, that I'm never the smartest person in the room, because we all bring a completely different background, and that I have a lot to learn from others. And so it created a lot of confidence for me. It put me, you know, people are always, how do you make a presentation? How do I get experience and exposure speaking? Well, stand in front of 30 students every Monday night for a decade, and they're going to challenge you, and they're going to be students who have had full days and And so that was helpful. And then much like Tina and Debbie, any offer of training, development, and education is a gift. So take it. Whatever they offer, whatever your company has, sign up for it, volunteer, take it. And the Institute gave me my first leadership assignment. I was part of the Ontario Academic Council. I was just a kid, but I was doing well as an instructor. They invited me onto the council, and lo and behold, there was a transition. And the Insurance Institute asked me to be a volunteer chair of that team long before any employer would have given me a crack at management. So that first management interview was, oh, I have sat in front of a very diverse group of people and had to gain consensus and influence and manage or lead through influence to the right outcome, with the entire room filled with far greater tenure and experience. So a gift from the Insurance Institute ×2, Bev.
Amazing. That's great. We are almost out of time, and there were a couple of other questions, and I'm hoping that somehow everyone will get connected and continue the networking. But I wanted to give each of you an opportunity for one final thought. And I was thinking about myself, if I was in the audience today and I had the opportunity to chat with you, I'd want you to tell me, Bev, you need to do this one thing now in terms of your career development. What would that be? And we'll leave that as a final thought from each of you. Tina?
Well, I'll answer it slightly different. I would say if you aspire to have greater challenges and greater opportunities, two things. One, always talk to your manager or leader about what you can do to improve your skills, hone your skills, get more technical acumen. What do you need to do to jump to that next level, and how you can support them? And then the other thing I would say, having learned it the hard way, in 2013, we created a new structure in the company, and there was a new role created that I wasn't offered the job for, and I thought I was very qualified for. It was nothing against the person that got the job. But what I learned from that is that when I talked to our global CEO at the time about it, he basically told me, Tina, you had never put your hand up expressing you were interested in something beyond where you were. So I would also just say to everybody, despite what you might think in terms of knocking the lights out and doing everything you should, you've always got to raise your hand and make it heard that you're interested in more opportunity, and find out what you need to do to help fulfill those wishes for yourself.
Great advice, Tina. Debbie, your final thought.
It's interesting. I just had a couple of sessions with managers across the country in the last couple of days, Bevan. I think because of where we find ourselves in this very unique circumstances with a lot of employees working at home in a hybrid world, I think it is more important than ever. And I honestly believe that individuals need to take their seriousness and their career ownership, I guess is the word I'm looking for, not seriousness, but their ownership to a new level, especially when you're in a hybrid world environment. And so a little bit of what Tina said to build on that is be really, really clear with your manager what your career aspirations are, but also be, have some tenacity and curiosity. What's outside of my world? And if she or he can't help, say, where can I get some more information about that area of the company or that area of the company? Because in the insurance world, there are so many opportunities in each company out there, and in brokerages as well. In all honesty, it's not just, tunnel vision. And so be curious, be tenacious, and put your hand up and be virtually present in today's world and make it known. Your manager does not know everything that you want to do. And I've had employees come to me in my tenure as well, say, I didn't, and it's not, they have to be curious, because you have to check every posting. You have to find a way to find out what's out there.
Awesome. And Lynn, final words.
Am I allowed to say ditto? I mean, great advice. I'm going to be incredibly pragmatic, which is one of my cornerstones. So for me, it's always the 3 E's: education, experience, and exposure. So education, like kill the job, take the courses, whatever's on offer. Just broaden your horizons, read a newspaper or wherever you get your feed, but go to the alternative news sources that, to Tina's point, are different than your lens on the world. The experience is building that skill set and being very deliberate about your next step, and make sure you know what next steps are available, investigate them, as Debbie said, but putting your hand up and letting people know what you want. And exposure is, how do you get in the room? So how do, I've counseled so many young men and women where, I just worked on this quote for this big, huge deal and we landed it. The client is coming to town and I'm very angry because I did not get invited to dinner. And I said, oh, well, that was my decision. So you've come to the right place. Let me tell you how this works. The broker and the client add up to 4 people. We add up to 4 people. That's always the way we do this. We never overwhelm them with the entire 20-person team that had to pull this all together. And your time will come. But more importantly, why don't you right now go across the street and buy that broker a cup of coffee? You don't need to be at the big dinner. That will come. But create your own opportunities, do what's within your own sphere of influence right now. And then the final thought, $100, that's all. Personal membership in the Insurance Supper Club of Canada. So Bev will get you the chat or the link. And it is a group of Canadian executive property and casualty women mentoring hundreds of Canadian property casualty young professionals. It's all about women. It's a very fun organization, and Terry Dodsworth is chairing it for us. Sorry, Sherry Dodsworth is chairing it for us here in Canada right now. And that's all, Bev.
Wow. Is there another adjective for wow, for a fantastic conversation today? Thank you, thank you, thank you, is all that I can say. Thank you to the Insurance Institute of Canada, the New Entrants Committee, our industry friends, colleagues, and of course, Lynn Oldfield, Tina Olson, and Debbie Cool-Cicchini. Fantastic discussion today. I hope that everyone will continue the discussion. Check out the insuranceinstitute.ca, new to the industry link for more information just on some of our upcoming seminars and events, and just to get connected with the Insurance Institute. I think we've ended Women's History Month with a bang. I am thrilled that you were with us today. Thank you all for being a part of this great discussion. And I wish you all a great rest of the day. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
You